Welcome to the Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. My name is John Wensveen, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer here at NSU and Executive Director of the Center of Innovation. So the Center of Innovation is really being designed as an economic development engine for Broward County and South Florida. And what that means is that we're going to be embedded with different stakeholders in the community, from government to industry, public and private, the education sector, again, public and private, as well as interacting with different stakeholders outside of our community. So we'll have local, regional, national, and international impact. This is literally being created to be a gateway or a hub as part of a spoke system, if you will, where we link all of these resources together. And this is truly the only initiative occurring in South Florida that identifies what the ecosystem for innovation looks like and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we tie it together through this particular facility. So as a guest coming into the Center of Innovation, you'll automatically come off the elevator here, and there will be 3 translucent televisions here that welcome you to the center using animated technology and give you that wow experience as you come into the facility. As you come through what will be glass doors here, you'll walk into the reception area, and the reception area will be outfitted with all kinds of technology and the ability to actually personally greet you and help escort you throughout the facility to the location that you need to get to. As we go into this space over here, this will be multiple use of space, primarily for offices and for lecturing and different types of talks. Be very circular in design, and there'll be glass offices surrounding the circular design where we have entrepreneurs in residence and executives in residence and coaches and facilitators, instructor occupying that space, along with students and community stakeholders that are here for the different types of programs that we have. As we flow through the facility and walk into this area, this is really a high-tech corridor, if you will, where we have a dedicated cybersecurity training range. It'll be one of a kind in this part of the region of the country. We'll also have a media studio outfitted with the latest technology for radio, TV, webcasts, podcasts, etc. And as we enter into this particular area of the facility, we'll have dedicated office space, primarily executives in residence and entrepreneurs in residence. And this area right here will be very much focused on events. So this particular area is very vast, and we'll have 3 separate spaces potentially where we're utilizing what we call skyfold technology walls. And with the flip of a switch, we can literally lift the walls into the ceiling and create one very large space that can accommodate approximately 500 individuals, or we can break it into 2 or 3 smaller spaces so simultaneous events can occur. And because of the technology utilized in the walls, they are acoustically sound and will not have any negative impact on the participants utilizing our facility. And then as we move into this other transformative space, this is really the social zone of the facility, if you will, where people can gather around a grab-and-go cafe that's humanless. So we utilize the latest technology to get your food and beverage. And then over on the end of the facility where we have glass looking out into other buildings here, this will be the stadium seating where we have pitch competitions, and this will be an opportunity where entrepreneurs can come and literally pitch to venture capitalists and angel investor networks or industry that may be interested in helping support or even acquire the inventions that are coming here out of the facility. So this project has really captured the attention of our community right from the very beginning, when it was literally just the vision, and there were so many different stakeholders that wanted to be involved in this and be extremely supportive. Going back to the very beginning of the official timeline of the project, Iyayi was the architectural firm that was selected to help create the design of the Center of Innovation, and they were selected because of their innovative ways of doing things. So they were a great natural partner for where we were going. We were also introduced to P2 Interiors, and P2 Interiors is the interior design company that's helped us literally create the vision in terms of the look and the feel, everything from the shapes of the walls to the colors of the palette to the different types of furniture. And then we went forward with a request for proposals for the construction company to take this vision and this design to the next level and actually bang the nails, if you will. And JWR was selected, and they were selected because of their past history of doing really great, innovative construction projects. We just felt that they were a natural partner in terms of where we were going, in a great alignment with our architects and our interior designers.
It's invaluable to be able to know the client, and how they work so that we can perform best for them, right? That learning curve over 15 years, is really helped make everybody successful in the projects that we do with them, so.
Today is Friday, November the 6th, 2020, and we are sitting here at the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. We've got a number of trades teams in here today making significant progress and expect to see more over the next few days. Sonny, I'm wondering if you could share with our audience where we are right now, what's been done to date, and what the next couple of weeks look like as we do these monthly videos.
Well, we started on 10/12, and we started with the demo. The demo, as of today, has been completed. We then started with the Ardex, which is a self-leveling flooring material. Our next phase will actually be to start laying out for the walls, and we will start building the walls next week.
So here we are standing in the Center of Innovation event space that will incorporate these Skyfold technology walls. Can you explain what's going on?
We've dug down 1.5 inches, and on top of this we'll form up and we'll pour another 1.5 inches for a total of a 3-inch curb for the Skyfold walls to actually sit on. What they're doing right now is they're putting down the Ardex, which is the self-leveling material.
The Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation is a brand new economic development engine for Broward County and the South Florida region. We're focused on innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship, and we have 4 pillars as our foundation: ideate, incubate, accelerate, and post-accelerate. We have 6 primary outcomes here at the center, and it includes breakthrough ideation, the creation of new technologies, a new talent skills pipeline with new relevant credentials for emerging industries, new jobs, company formation, and the scaling of existing businesses, including early stage and young startup companies. The Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation is making significant progress in terms of the construction, and as we sit here today, approximately 2.5 weeks into our journey over the next 6 to 7 months, we are moving forward, and it's amazing. And I have to say, of all of the construction facilities that I've been in from start to finish, this is the absolute most organized environment that I've ever been in. It's clean, it's safe, and it's a true pleasure and a model for other projects moving forward. We're at the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation, where we're approaching the 8th week of our magnificent construction project. And I have to say that I am super impressed by how fast things are quickly coming together.
This whole section here, Section A, has been framed out. Insulation is already in, and we have scheduled our first rough electrical inspection for next week already. We've gotten our first load of drywall that came in. And as you can see from over here, we're starting to install drywall where the soffits go.
We're now at the north end of the facility that's going to house a smart technology screen that's multifunctional in terms of its capacity, which would be really great for the space that we're in. What would be really neat about it is that your presenter will be right here in the center space, and it'll be surrounded by stadium seating that goes all across this back wall right here. This is really a true competitive pitched room that really doesn't exist in South Florida, and we're outfitting it with all the right IT and AV equipment to make it top-notch and world-class.
This is the back wall of the stadium seating, which is all framed up already. The blackout windows are completed, and next week we'll be starting the actual framing for the stadium seating. This is the quiet area, which is completely framed out at this point, waiting for inspection, and then the next phase will be insulation and drywall.
We're out on the west side of the facility, and we have this large circular design, which is really incredible in terms of transformative space, where on the exterior of the circle we'll have offices that are encased in glass for our residents, and then we'll have a curtain that draws on the other part of the semicircle, and then on the inside of the circle we'll have magnificent use of space that can be used for lectures or speaking environments or meetings. Do you want to give us a little bit of an update of what we're doing here?
Sure, John. What we're doing here is we're building the soffits around the circular offices. They already did the first section already, now they're doing the second section.
So I have to say that the progress is absolutely phenomenal, and we cannot thank JWR enough for the incredible job that you're doing. And it truly, as I said in our last video, that this is the safest, cleanest, neatest construction project that I've ever been exposed to, and your team and everybody who got involved is just incredible.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. I could not have done it without the help of our team, starting with Raphael Orenday from Iyayi Architects, who has worked with us almost on a daily basis. He's been great to work with. We've worked out any issues that we may have. The same thing with NSU's construction department, with Rebecca and Gio, who have helped me tremendously, and to all the subs that have worked so far to this date. We started out with 5-man crew working, and today we've got 43 men working. They've all done a great job and kept right up with me and helped me keep the place clean.
I love what you just said there about the number of people that we have employed, because we're building an economic development engine, and it's already started by the volume of employees that are actually engaged in this process. So thank you, and again, really can't help say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. My name is John Wensveen, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer here at NSU and Executive Director of the Center of Innovation. So the Center of Innovation is really being designed as an economic development engine for Broward County and South Florida. And what that means is that we're going to be embedded with different stakeholders in the community, from government to industry, public and private, the education sector, again, public and private, as well as interacting with different stakeholders outside of our community. So we'll have local, regional, national, and international impact. This is literally being created to be a gateway or a hub as part of a spoke system, if you will, where we link all of these resources together. And this is truly the only initiative occurring in South Florida that identifies what the ecosystem for innovation looks like and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we tie it together through this particular facility. So as a guest coming into the Center of Innovation, you'll automatically come off the elevator here, and there will be 3 translucent televisions here that welcome you into the center using animated technology and give you that wow experience as you come into the facility. As you come through what will be glass doors here, you'll walk into the reception area, and the reception area will be outfitted with all kinds of technology and the ability to actually personally greet you and help escort you throughout the facility to the location that you need to get to. As we go into this space over here, this will be multiple use of space, primarily for offices and for lecturing and different types of talks. Be very circular in design, and there'll be glass offices surrounding the circular design, where we have entrepreneurs in residence and executives in residence and coaches and facilitators, instructor occupying that space, along with students and community stakeholders that are here for the different types of programs that we have. As we flow through the facility and walk into this area, this is really a high-tech corridor, if you will, where we have a dedicated cybersecurity training range. It'll be one of a kind in this part of the region of the country. We'll also have a media studio outfitted with the latest technology for radio, TV, webcasts, podcasts, etc. And as we enter into this particular area of the facility, we'll have dedicated office space, primarily executives in residence and entrepreneurs in residence. And this area right here will be very much focused on events. So this particular area is very vast, and we'll have 3 separate spaces potentially where we're utilizing what we call skyfold technology walls. And with the flip of a switch, we can literally lift the walls into the ceiling and create one very large space that can accommodate approximately 500 individuals, or we can break it into 2 or 3 smaller spaces so simultaneous events can occur. And because of the technology utilized in the walls, they're acoustically sound and will not have any negative impact on the participants utilizing our facility. And then as we move into this other transformative space, this is really the social zone of the facility, if you will, where people can gather around a grab-and-go cafe that's humanless. So we utilize the latest technology to get your food and beverage. And then over on the end of the facility, where we have glass looking out into other buildings here, This will be the stadium seating where we have pitch competitions, and this will be an opportunity where entrepreneurs can come and literally pitch to venture capitalists and angel investor networks or industry that may be interested in helping support or even acquire the inventions that are coming here out of the facility. So this project has really captured the attention of our community right from the very beginning, when it was literally just the vision, and there were so many different stakeholders that wanted to be involved in this and be extremely supportive. Going back to the very beginning of the official timeline of the project, Iyayi was the architectural firm that was selected to help create the design of the Center of Innovation, and they were selected because of their innovative ways of doing things, so they were a great natural partner for where we were going. We were also introduced to P2 Interiors, and P2 Interiors is the interior design company that's helped us literally create the vision in terms of the look and the feel, everything from the shapes of the walls to the colors of the palette to the different types of furniture. And then we went forward with a request for proposals for the construction company to take this vision and this design to the next level and actually bang the nails, if you will. And JWR was selected, and they were selected because of their past history of doing really great, innovative construction projects. We just felt that they were a natural partner in terms of where we were going, in a great alignment with our architects and our interior designers.
It's invaluable to be able to know the client, and how they work, so that we can perform best for them, right? That learning curve over 15 years, is really helped make everybody successful in the projects that we do with them, so.
Today is Friday, November the 6th, 2020, and we are sitting here at the Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. We've got a number of trades teams in here today making significant progress, and expect to see more over the next few days. Sonny, I'm wondering if you could share with our audience where we are right now, what's been done to date, and what the next couple of weeks look like as we do these monthly videos.
Well, we started on 10/12, and we started with the demo. The demo, as of today, has been completed. We then started with the Ardex, which is a self-leveling flooring material. Our next phase will actually be to start laying out for the walls, and we will start building the walls next week.
So here we are standing in the Center of Innovation event space that will incorporate these skyfold technology walls. Can you explain what's going on?
We've dug down 1.5 inches, and on top of this we'll form up and we'll pour another 1.5 inches for a total of a 3-inch curb for the skyfold walls to actually sit on. What they're doing right now is they're putting down the Ardex, which is the self-leveling material.
The Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation is a brand new economic development engine for Broward County and the South Florida region. We're focused on innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship, and we have 4 pillars as our foundation: ideate, incubate, accelerate, and post-accelerate. We have 6 primary outcomes here at the center, and it includes breakthrough ideation, the creation of new technologies, a new talent skills pipeline with new relevant credentials for emerging industries, new jobs, company formation, and the scaling of existing businesses, including early stage and young startup companies. The Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation is making significant progress in terms of the construction, and as we sit here today, approximately 2.5 weeks into our journey over the next 6 to 7 months, we are moving forward, and it's amazing. And I have to say, of all of the construction facilities that I've been in from start to finish, this is the absolute most organized environment that I've ever been in. It's clean, it's safe, and it's a true pleasure and a model for other projects moving forward. here at the Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation, where we're approaching the 8th week of our magnificent construction project. And I have to say that I am super impressed by how fast things are quickly coming together.
This whole section here, section A, has been framed out. Insulation is already in, and we have scheduled our first rough electrical inspection for next week already. We've gotten our first load of drywall that came in, and as you can see from over here, we're starting to install drywall where the soffits go.
We're now at the north end of the facility, and it's going to house a smart technology screen that's multifunctional in terms of its capacity, which would be really great for this space that we're in. What would be really neat about it is that your presenter will be right here in the center space, and they'll be surrounded by stadium seating that goes all across this back wall right here. This is really a true competitive pitched room that really doesn't exist in South Florida, and we're outfitting it with all the right IT and AV equipment to make it top-notch and world-class.
This is the back wall of the stadium seating, which is all framed up already. The blackout windows are completed, and next week we'll be starting the actual framing for the stadium seating. This is the quiet area, which is completely framed out at this point, waiting for inspection, and then the next phase will be insulation and drywall.
We're now on the west side of the facility, and we have this large circular design, which is really incredible in terms of transformative space, where on the exterior of the circle we'll have offices that are encased in glass for our residents, and then we'll have a curtain that draws on the other part of the semicircle, and then on the inside of the circle we'll have magnificent use of space that can be used for lectures or speaking environments or meetings. Do you want to give us a little bit of an update of what we're doing here?
Sure, John. What we're doing here is we're building the soffits around the circular offices. They already did the first section already, now they're doing the second section.
So I have to say that the progress is absolutely phenomenal, and we cannot thank JWR enough for the incredible job that you're doing. And it truly, as I said in our last video, that this is the safest, cleanest, neatest construction project that I've ever been exposed to, and your team and everybody you got involved is just incredible.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. I could not have done it without the help of our team, starting with Raphael Orenday from Iyayi Architects, who has worked with us almost on a daily basis. He's been great to work with. We've worked out any issues that we may have. The same thing with NSU's construction department, with Rebecca and Gio, who have helped me tremendously, and to all the subs that have worked so far to this date. We started out with 5-man crew working, and today we've got 43 men working. They've all done a great job and kept right up with me and helped me keep the place clean.
I love what you just said there about the number of people that we have employed, because we're building an economic development engine, and it's already started by the volume of employees that are actually engaged in this process. So thank you again. Really can't help say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Innovators, entrepreneurs, funders, community leaders, friends, live from the Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation, welcome to today's event, The State of the Global Startup Ecosystem, featuring key influencers from around the world. Let the event begin.
I got it. We have multiple deck-born companies like Uber and Airbnb, and numerous ones on the horizon. There are also a number of trends impacting entrepreneurship, including examples like the digital economy, globalized business, mobile commerce, social commerce, niche markets, subscription-based business, social responsibility, young entrepreneurs, mobile businesses, and green businesses. Over the next 60 to 90 minutes, we will address a number of key questions representing different perspectives from around the world. Now that the foundation has been set, I'm so excited to introduce today's amazing panel. Welcome, David Ponraj from Startup Space, coming to us with a North American perspective. Susan Amat from the Global Entrepreneurship Network, coming to us with a global perspective. Danny Lopez from Glasswall, who is in London, coming to us from a perspective within the United Kingdom. George Northcott from Founders Factory, also coming from the United Kingdom. And Barbara Iyayi from Unicorn Growth Capital, representing the African perspective. For our panelists, as we start the Q&A portion of the program now, feel free to provide a short overview of your organization or admit that in any of your responses as we move forward. The first question focuses on innovation, and I think it's important to define what it is. Starting with David, what is your definition of aviation? Innovation, I'm sorry. I said aviation because I'm an aviation nerd, that's my background, but aviation is innovation, innovation is aviation. But can you give us a definition of what innovation is and innovation?
So I increased audio, so the problem was
Yes, and I had it lowered for you. Oh no, whoever this is, somebody's calling me out.
but you need to
I can't answer. Huh?
just saying the microphone is muted.
It is off.
Okay.
Oh, it's off.
Work with whether it's ministry, policymakers, all focused on a bottom-up approach to building great entrepreneurs who solve the problems of their regions and then connect them globally. So the question of what is innovation, I think we have to start with the very simple definition, which is adding value, making something new. The reality is a lot of people get something like that confused with the notion of what is creativity. So creativity is doing something new and novel. When it's innovation, it's about the value creation aspect and having it be something that can be taken to market. And I'm very fortunate, as all of us on this call are, that we get to focus on building innovation with entrepreneurs, but sometimes what it really comes down to is what are the problems that need to be solved for a specific customer, a specific region. So we oftentimes get caught up in being innovative for innovation's sake, when in reality, some of the best entrepreneurs are just solving a problem locally that needs to be solved. It may not scale globally, but it creates something new and novel, or it changes the way something is done somewhere else, the copycat version, for a local need. So, because at the end of the day, true innovation is solving the problem by adding value to whatever the situation is that needs to be done. So,
and I love that. I love that response, and yes, it helps. I remember about a year and a half ago, I was very fortunate to travel with Susan. She took me to Bahrain and got to attend this major global event around entrepreneurship, and the word innovation was thrown a lot around. And what I realized is that there are so many different definitions of innovation, but at the end, all those definitions, no matter how you describe it, all come back to one particular area of focus. What I love, and there's no official terminology for it when you research and Google innovation. There's thousands of definitions of what it is, and I think that the word innovation is still innovating in terms of definition. But appreciate your responses, David and Susan. So with that, let's move over to Danny. And what's your definition of innovation?
Thanks, John. And the same from me. It's great to be part of this kickoff meeting and to join you, your team, and the rest of the panel today. I mean, we've already had two really good responses, so I'm not sure I'm going to come up with an innovative response to what has been said so far. But look, first of all, I'm the CEO of a company called Glasswall. We are a cybersecurity company. We specialize in the field called content, disarm, and reconstruction. And we are all about dealing with file-based threats. We're a software company that specializes in helping organizations mitigate the risk of receiving file-based threats. For me, innovation is about coming up with a solution. It's building on that concept of value and coming up with something that is different. To me, it's about coming up with an improved proposition that is different to anything that's already out there. I think that the one thing for me that's very important, and I really like that concept you just said, Susan, is that we live in an age now where whenever we talk about innovation, we're just immediately associated with technology. And the reality is that for a lot of us, that's basically our bread and butter, and it's our everyday. And we talk about innovation because we're in a technology-driven world. But I don't think that has anything to do with the definition of innovation. Because for me, innovation, as you know, as has already been said in such an articulate way by David and by Susan, it's really is that incremental value that does something different that is better. You know, it might be cheaper. It might be more efficient. It might be providing more customer choice. It might be just providing a solution that is far simpler, you know, same result, but done so simply that it really is better. So it's always for me about that incremental value. You know, in an ideal world, it scales, it generates lots of money, it does all these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I'm completely with Susan. You know, this is a difference between creativity and innovation. It really is about that incremental value. As it happens, because of what we've been living through over the last few months and frankly years in a way, so much of it comes from technology, and I think we'll be talking about that a lot today. But I do think it's important that from a foundations perspective, you kind of separate both.
Yeah, I think you brought up a very interesting point too, is often when you talk about innovation, one of the first responses is, oh, it's technology, and innovation is so much more than just technology. And I think all of you have hit that on the head so far. So George, what's your perspective in terms of definition of innovation?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on the panel today. I'm one of the co-founders of a business called Founders Factory. We are a global startup studio and accelerator where we combine hands-on operating support for entrepreneurs, access to large corporates and capital to create new startups from scratch and accelerate existing businesses with really meaningful help to those founders. We're based in London, but have offices and programs in Johannesburg, Paris, and New York as well. And yeah, fascinating hearing everyone's perspective on innovation and how to define it. I think building on what Susan and Danny said, I think, you know, it's not necessarily about kind of chasing unicorns and scaling globally. I think, you know, it's an ability to solve problems through technology, definitely, creativity, but also kind of human collaboration. I think that final piece is really critical. And I think it's also interesting to think of innovation and the different stakeholders. I think corporations, universities, entrepreneurs, and investors all come together to allow innovation to happen and to thrive. And I guess that's what's really interesting about the kind of ecosystem development that NSU is doing. And I think all of us are part of that ecosystem in different ways in our respective geographies. So I think it's very much about bringing people together to work on and solve problems.
So what I like about that response is that you named a number of different stakeholders, and it's those stakeholders that come together to help create that team to support and make innovation happen, which I think is really important as well. And Barbara, last but not least, and I promise you'll be first to go in another question as we go on, but your definition of innovation, and I'm really interested from the African perspective.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Barbara Iyayi. I am the founding partner and CEO of Unicorn Growth Capital, which is a fintech fund that is focused on essentially investing in the category leaders of tomorrow that are powering the digital economy. So the premise of the fund is really around how fintech is a key enabler of the digital economy. And that really sort of flows into the conversation about innovation. So I actually look at innovation more about changing the way you think and changing your mindset. I think it's a mindset change. And when we think about innovation, to add to what everyone has said, it's really what actually stops innovation. And a lot of it is sort of what I learned from business school, which is the innovator's dilemma, right? Where people are not structured or incentivized. Organizations are not structured or incentivized to innovate, right? And that's what blocks innovation, because people sort of look at life as a zero-sum game, and they don't look at life as expansion and expanding the pie. And I think innovation is fundamentally that. And I would also say innovation comes out of crises, like where we are right now. My fund is focused on companies operating in Africa, and Africa is in itself a crisis where there's been a lot of lack of infrastructure and lack of resources. It's a high cost environment to build. So when you think of companies actually being formed in that region, these companies are thinking about innovation from that perspective. How do we innovate where there's lack of resources? That's where a lot of really interesting ideas come from. So I would say innovation is sort of a mindset change. You constantly thinking about just changing your way of thinking, and that leads to really innovative ideas.
That's great. In my aviation history, in terms of career, I've spent a considerable amount of time throughout the African region, and I always found some really interesting, innovative ideas coming on the side of a street. And one of the most memorable things that I ever saw was a gentleman that built his own bicycle that was stationary, that was tied to a bucket of soap, and he created a washing machine through pedal power with his bicycle. And I just think about how many hundreds or thousands of ideas like that have the opportunity to be more innovative and get to that next level. And that's one thing I find really intriguing about Africa. So I was doing some research recently, and I was looking at economics and found that the global startup economy generates nearly $3 trillion a year annually, which is only going to increase on a year-by-year basis. Startups have always been the driving force behind the world market, bringing new ideas and transforming business systems. And David, what I'd like to do is go to you, and I'd like to ask you how the founder's journey has changed over the last 5 years, and what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, which I know is just a prediction and many things can change, but interested to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I'll differentiate the founder's journey between everyday small businesses and the high growth, high tech startups. I think that they live very parallel lives in terms of the actual starting of a business. But I think that's a really good question around what will change in how we start businesses. I think that the journey that we're all on collectively is to democratize information, break down barriers to entry, and help people start businesses. That's kind of ultimately all our goals. And I started a business in the first decade of 2020. I've started a business in the second decade of 2000, first decade of 2000 and second decade. And what I found is that in spite of all of the information that's out there, we are still extremely fragmented. And I think that the future of business starts needs to really address this idea that we all need to have a level playing field from which we start, that we should win and die on or lose on our own merits, not on the availability or access to resources, especially information resource. I haven't found in speaking with entrepreneurs across the board an easier path just from the fact that you now know, how to build a deck with an addressable market size, or being able to build a pitch deck. I think that my prediction is that as we all collectively solve this problem around helping founders start, no matter if it's a solopreneur, a brick and mortar, everyday entrepreneur, or a high-tech, high-growth startup, I think that the problem that we will all solve for collectively is how do you simplify the journey to starting a business and increase the probability of success to start a business. That's what we're passionate about at Startup Space. That's what we listen to our clients across the country talk about. How do you kind of get resources in front of small businesses? And it's not as simple as getting the information out there. There's real problems, especially in rural America, around the digital divide. There's real problems around connectivity that you wouldn't expect in this time and age. But there are lots of real problems we need to solve if we want to create starting businesses to be the true economic drivers of the future, and really kind of bring the idea of starting business as a true path to wealth creation. I think we need to focus on how do you kind of remove these barriers. So while I cannot predict the future, I think I can define the problem really well and leave it up to the rest of you smart folks to help us figure out what the solution should be.
So 3 key words that you said: breaking down barriers. And I know that you have a podcast series that addresses this specifically, in which you get different perspectives in terms of how you do that. And it's not a local or a regional or a national problem. It's an international challenge that I think that all entrepreneurs face within the ecosystem that continues to build. Susan, bouncing off of what David just presented, what are the most critical changes facing the startup ecosystem that ecosystem builders like yourself can shape their resources to support the future of the ecosystem?
Well, I'm pretty lucky in that maybe 7 years ago, I was able to shift from being an ecosystem developer myself to going all over the world and figuring out what was working and not working, and then creating the training and structure around what good ecosystem building looks like. And I was really happy that you started the conversation today with some stats from Startup Genome. So I end up doing a lot of measurement and evaluation work in partnership with Startup Genome, and we have partnerships all over the world together. The major challenges that we see for many ecosystem builders comes from a lack of understanding what goals and metrics they should be tracking to see if this ecosystem building actually works. So there's a lot of people out there who call themselves ecosystem builders and frame their work in a convening, events, conversation, networking way. And there's no data to show any value, and there's no clarity on where they're trying to go with this. And so David touched upon challenges in the US for people to start businesses. I have such a blockage right now thinking about first world problems. We do a program called Entrepreneurship World Cup. Last year we had 175,000 applicants from over 193 countries. And what someone needs to do to start and grow a business when they have zero resources and there's not even structure in the government, and there's currency devaluation and the insane things that are happening every single day, but people overcome them. That's really what it takes to be a great entrepreneur. And the innovators and the job creators are not the people complaining about how hard it is to find things. They're the people who are just like, I'm going to keep my head down and I'm just going to do it. So when we kind of circle back to your question, what do ecosystem developers need to do? If they're focused on a certain geography, it really has to be about what are the specific challenges, not just for starting a job, because starting a job, no matter where a company, no matter where you are, it's very different. There isn't one, solution. But it's then when you have somebody who's going to work their tail off and just solves the problems left and right and is focused on a customer issue, and they have something, how do you help them have the resources, which doesn't always mean money. A lot of times it means helping them have better communication skills, getting them access to somebody at a company who's actually going to help them understand what it means to be vendorized, or how to change the way they're able to do manufacturing or testing, versus just, it's not about access to VCs. It's the on the ground, how do we go from I have something and I know that people need it and it's a real solution, to getting it out there and making sales. So the global discourse really has to come back to ecosystem developers being focused on solving a problem themselves, and then capturing the data to show that they made a difference in whatever their efforts were, instead of just, hosting a whole bunch of events.
So you bring up a whole lot of valid points, and Susan is one of the most well-traveled people that I know. You can call her on a Monday, she's in one hemisphere. On Tuesday, she's in a different one, and Wednesday, she's back in the original one. And
not recently, but yes.
Not recently. But so we never know where Susan is, and it's great because you have this perspective on what's going on in so many different parts of the world, and a lot of places that people never even get to see or even know exist. So your perspective on entrepreneurship, generally speaking, is very interesting to me. Also, another thing to add to that list is just self-care management. I think that one of the things that we find with entrepreneurs at any stage is just how do you look after yourself through this journey? And it's a strenuous, challenging process. And how do you look after yourself in addition to everything that you just named? So this next question is for all of our panelists, and we're going to start with you, Barbara. But what startup vertical is making the greatest advancements in your market, and what are they doing to gain this traction? Barbara, if you could take that question.
Sure. So I would, harp on fintech. I would say that most of the funding that has gone, and there's been, Africa has a small ecosystem. They've only been, I would say in the last 5 years, maybe up to like $4.5 billion of VC funding has gone into Africa. And most of that funding, over half of it, has gone into fintech startups. So so I would say fintech is a key sector. And for not just for the fact that it's getting a lot of funding, it's also generating more exits in the VC ecosystem. I think that one of the biggest was that Stripe bought a payment company in Nigeria called Paystack. And then there's just a lot of startups being set up. And the real reason behind it is actually what I'm focused on investing in. And that's the rise of these companies that are building infrastructure platforms to enable these fintech companies to grow. The entire ecosystem is about embedding finance. Digital platforms are embedding finance in their platforms. And so these financial infrastructure companies are helping everyone, from the telcos to the banks to the e-commerce platforms, to embed payments, to embed lending, to embed wealth management, to embed whatever it takes to get more people financial services so that they can consume the services, products and services that they're offering. And I think that's what's really innovative right now. The fact that people are changing their mindset. They're thinking, okay, if I'm a telco, I need to offer financial services. If I'm an SME, I need all these infrastructure solutions so that I can start going online and increasing my revenue pool. And so that's really hot right now. And I would say that is what's really powering the economy, the digital economy. A lot of these companies across all industries, agriculture, logistics, healthcare, they're all building platforms, digital platforms, and they have the solutions to be digitalized. And so when we think about ecosystem development, while I'm not an ecosystem developer, I completely get what Susan is saying, in that what I try to invest in are companies that will sort of create that multiplier effect to build the ecosystem, to encourage more startups to be formed, and to encourage the digital economy to grow. And I think there are many layers of building ecosystems, but that is my way of doing it. And I can track that because I can see how many startups can be built on top of the companies that I invest in. So yeah, that's the hot conversation going on in Africa, fintech.
So we're going to go to George in a minute, but just I want to follow up on something that you said as a quick question. Africa, compared to other regions of the world, typically in terms of how the world advances, Africa is usually falling in the last position, and there are many industries where you can show that, and there are different areas where Africa is excelling. But when you talk about the digital economy and interconnectivity occurring, do you think that Africa has an opportunity to leapfrog where it's been to into the future and be more competitive with the rest of the world?
Absolutely, and that's because there's just not much legacy infrastructure and regulations hampering the ability for these digital platforms to take off. One of the things that is really taking off in Africa is cryptocurrency, because people have no choice. Like Susan said, there's a lot of currency volatility. There are very few liquidity options out there. And so there are a lot of companies powering their ecosystems with crypto and blockchain. Because it's really making a difference in people's lives. And so Africa this is probably the most important way for Africa to leapfrog into generating significant economic growth and lifting people out of poverty is through the digital economy. And there are a lot of lessons we can learn from the ecosystems in Africa, in other geographies in the US that are underserved and overlooked, to sort of boost them up, and that's what we're doing. Yeah. So
cryptocurrency is an interesting discussion as well. I mean, last week we were hitting record highs, and this week not so much. So very volatile, and I'm afraid to look at the computer today to see what's going on in the world of cryptocurrency. But George, we'll take it over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess it's hard to talk about last year and this year without thinking about healthcare. It's been our main focus in the US, as we have Johnson & Johnson as our back. And I think COVID has highlighted, the huge social and economic discrepancies in healthcare, and the sort of urgency for greater and deeper healthcare innovation. And just this kind of clear need to make healthcare more behind some of the work we're doing. I think some of the trends that we've seen in the last health and kind of direct to consumer, as well as kind of at-home diagnostics.
So George, we're having a slight technical glitch with the connectivity there, so I'm just going to move on if that's okay, and we'll be coming back to you. But we got it. We're talking about health and making health more fun, and I think we got most of what you said. But we'll come back to you on another question. But we're having some connection issues there, unfortunately.
Okay.
So with that said, Danny, if you look at the startup verticals that are making great advancements in the markets that you're concentrated on, what are they doing to gain this traction?
So firstly, I would also I'd pick on fintech. Barbara has already mentioned all of the reasons, but I just think that this whole concept of reimagining the way money flows, frankly, which is what this is all about. At the end of the day, you can talk a lot about capital markets and wealth and insurance and a whole bunch of other things, but really it's just that, changing the way money flows and going back to our original question, improving the way it does that. And we've seen that over the last few months there was this debate about cash and how long cash will be around, and so many people will not be able to survive without it, which is true in so many ways. But then you're forced with an event like what we've lived through over the last few months, and whether you have access to it, whether you want it or not, you just can't access cash. And so I think there's been such a massive acceleration in digital tools on finance, which has, I think, improved the lives for so many people, because I generally think that fintech is a very big force for good, that I see it as a massive sector of opportunity. And I would highlight that for me, fintech is also, sometimes it's kind of like the startups are the good guys and the incumbents are the bad guys. And I don't think that's it at all. I think the whole point of fintech is that collaboration between the bigger players and the smaller players. And when you have that proper integration, you will see the best results, because actually a lot of the big players, might have come into it a little late, but some of the innovation that they're doing right now is, it's phenomenal too. So fintech, obviously. And then I'd pick on cyber, of course, which is my sector. We have seen, unfortunately, the scale of attacks increasing massively over the last few months. And again, unfortunately, when something happens, it can be crippling. We've seen the impact on the US government, of which we actually know very little over the last few weeks. There are some companies, Travelex being an example, that have been on their knees for a few weeks. And I'm afraid that it's like everything in life. There's good and there's bad, and we all hope that there's always more good than bad. And if that's the case, then we flourish as a society. society, but there is bad. We've got to recognize it. We've got to be prepared for it. We've got to invest very heavily in it. And I generally, I would say this, of course, but I generally do think that, companies who invest well, it's not about investing heavily, it's investing well in cyber will be the ones who will be best prepared to deal with this. And you will see huge growth in the sector because it requires masses of innovation to do a whole bunch of things differently. We've relied on antivirus technologies for years that have evolved to some sort of degree. It's not good enough. You need more. You pick your field of cyber. There's room to do things in a very different way, and there's loads of innovation out there. So I think a very hot area.
So I'm glad that you touched on cybersecurity, because I question industry and government all the time. Is the world really prepared for the trends that are occurring, and how do you keep up with those trends that change every day? And it's funny, recently just talking to budding entrepreneurs about where the opportunities lie, and often cybersecurity doesn't even come on the radar screen as an area of opportunity. So how do we guide more entrepreneurs into that? Because there's so much that can happen in the world of entrepreneurship there in terms of new products and services, and no one's ever going to master the art of how you battle crime in the world of cyber, and it's an evolving opportunity. Susan, how about your perspective, your part of the world, which is the world?
There's many. I think the other piece I'd like to add on to Barbara and Danny's comment is the loan functions in the fintech space, whether they be direct to consumer or for small business lending and micro lending. I see a lot happening there that it's really staggering, some of the work we're doing in Asia and Central Asia, where having loan products making $5 or $10 available for individuals is skyrocketing. So there's a lot in fintech outside of what we think of in the traditional bank or money movement to support e-commerce, etc. Obviously, healthcare is a very big one. I'm very interested continuously in all the things being done in cybersecurity. We work with a lot of Israeli companies, and that has just been fascinating to see how much they find without much effort when they really want to start looking for challenges. But the area that I've been really most focused on and working with a lot of startups in is in education. And that goes from traditional early learning, pre-K, making sure the foundation is there, especially when there are places where there's no electricity in the home, or we want to give them access to reading and both parents don't know how to read. So all the way through to what's happening right now with completely virtual learning environments. My team and I have been very lucky in that we've run virtual and hybrid acceleration programs for 7 years. So we've been very strong in ensuring as close to possible all virtual experience as we can approximate to the live. And the results are there, and it's been very, very strong. So when COVID hit, being able to assess what that means within not an applied situation where you do education and then you expect there to be data regarding sales or marketing efforts. We want that applied example to show that our education of the accelerator worked. In these kinds of examples where you have test taking and it's still theoretical knowledge and there may not be the application there yet for many of these kids, even doing the testing at scale is a lot harder than it should be at this point, especially when we're still so focused on connectivity issues and device accessibility, etc. So I think that that's a really important area. And many of the things, I hate talking about Africa because it's a continent. Many of the great things we're seeing in Kenya and South Africa, and even some of the things being done in Tunisia and Nigeria have been really exciting because there are really, really strong NGOs working directly with the ministries of education and other agencies to change what's happening on the ground and enable teachers and families to be more engaged in the education process. But there's still a long way to go in so many of the other countries in that region. And then, of course, Asia and other areas that do still have a lot of emerging market tendencies still have some ways to go.
So I'm glad you brought up the education process, because when you think about it, and I know me growing up, I didn't know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but that's actually what I wanted to be without having a definition around me. And I dabbled with things, and I was actually dabbling in entrepreneurial activities, but nobody ever used that word. There was never a course about entrepreneurship. And when you talk about the process within the education world, how do we better link the academic sector with the industry sector and the government sector and all the other sectors that are out there, so that this belief is that you have to be born to be an entrepreneur. It's in your blood, which I completely disagree with. You can teach people to be entrepreneurs, and there are those that just have it from within. But that ecosystem, or that life cycle of the entrepreneur, how do you start that at birth through the 19th hole, if you will, and everything between, so that we can support that journey from start to finish? And I think there's a great amount of opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's why Global Entrepreneurship Week started in 2008. It was to have the word entrepreneur mean something across the world, because not too recently, you're totally right, that word just didn't have a meaning to so many people. Even though they were starting their own things, building businesses, they didn't identify in that way. We've done a lot of work in K through 12, and there are just some people who, typically around 5th grade, they either view themselves as people who are problem solvers themselves, or people who complain and wait for someone else to solve it. So much of it comes back to at some point in early childhood, having the ability to see something and change it and have some positive reinforcement for being the person that did it. But by middle school, there is kind of a setting, if that exposure hasn't been done early enough. Some people are just very comfortable being employees, and there's nothing, we all need employees. So yay for employees, but the type of person who starts a company and feels sick for the next 3 to 10 years as they build it, while everybody else is telling them the 50,000 reasons why it won't work. And every day there's 20 things that go exactly opposite according to the plan, and you just kind of keep finding the strength to keep going. I don't know if that's something we want to build into people, or something we should diagnose early so we can get them the mental health resources they need. So the jury's still out on that.
So I just had flashbacks to 5th grade, and I think I was a teacher's nightmare now that I think about it. David, how about you?
Yeah, so I'll touch very quickly on edutech, because I think that edtech is, you look at 2008 and say, what changed fundamentally after the crisis in 2008? We are willing to sleep in other people's homes, and we're willing to get into other people's cars, strange people's cars. Right? Fundamentally changed. Before 2008, we wouldn't have thought about it. We're looking at 2020, and what has fundamentally changed? I think the biggest shock will be to the educational sector, because and I grew up in India. I got my degree in physics when I was 20 years old, and we were all like immersed in large volumes of material, just memorizing them. I was talking to my brother the other day. Their students, because of things like digital divide, access to digital devices, etc., are able to learn the same amount of content in about 3 hours virtually. Did we really need all that? I cannot tell you what differential equations mean anymore, So I think every aspect of education is going to fundamentally change. Also talking to a lot of universities that we support with our software, we found that a lot of them already had hybrid models, but are now really rethinking education as a whole, right? Even K through 12, talking to teachers about how they're using digital platforms. But, Susan had a great explanation on that. So I'll shift to an honorable mention that I think also significantly is going to change in the future, which is around virtual communities. Of course, recently there's been one in the news, and there was even a comment that made, without this virtual community, how am I supposed to communicate with my 4 million followers, right? There was actually, so I won't call any names, won't make any mentions, but the reality is that virtual communities and virtual platforms is the future. And even within our own software, before COVID hit, The first part of our demo was to tell people why you needed a virtual platform about 20, 30 minutes in, and then you tell how it works. You don't have to tell that anymore. You literally just talk about how it works, right? Because people understand and are very comfortable, which is going to enable the world of the future, which is holograms, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. All of these different components are now going to have are going to be accelerated versus coming in like year 2030. By 2024, we're going to be really comfortable meeting with people through holograms or like with their virtual avatars in our living rooms and in our workspaces and having a real experience there. So I think that virtual communities, it's not as cool sounding as fintech or all of cybersecurity, et cetera, but fundamentally the way we all interact as human beings is going to change. It has already changed. For example, I haven't been to my doctor in about, since whenever it hit, but I've talked to my doctor virtually and gotten all my medication through the phone, and it works just as fine. And I was able to, get all the devices I need to do any kind of healthcare checks right in my home. And I'm like, I hope my doctor is able to make money and earn a living because I haven't been to my doctors, but we are changing the way we're going to interact as human beings, and we're going to be very comfortable with the virtual world. And so, augmented reality, virtual reality, all of these things are going to speed up and kind of become very ubiquitous with the way in which we live.
Agreed. And the fact that we're all together right now under one roof, so to speak, is proof. Or in old days, we'd be on a stage and people be flying in and out, and lots of logistical nightmares around that. When you look at communities like Silicon Valley, Boston, Tel Aviv, London, Boulder, and Berlin as examples, it took decades to become robust entrepreneurial ecosystems. However, ecosystems can grow with key elements such as talent and funding, entrepreneurs, and engaging the entire entrepreneurial stack. The next question is for all of our panelists, and I'd like to ask what the number one way ecosystem builders, such as an innovation center like the one we're creating, can make a substantial difference in your market. And let's start with Barbara.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, we look at funding has been a really big challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs in the African region. But we need to drill down into funding, because there are many different types of funding and they can actually shape your ecosystem in different ways. So Africa in general with funding has been really financed by the development finance institutions and foundations, institutions that are using sort of impact money essentially to invest in the ecosystems there. That's a good thing in that, the sort of, they have patient capital to help get entrepreneurs off the ground. But it's not always ideal, because I think in a free market, very innovative world, we want entrepreneurs to do whatever they want to do that makes sense to solve the problem, right? And sometimes that impact money can be limiting, in terms of, meeting whatever impact objectives or whatever political agenda, frankly, that money comes from. And so what I would say is funding is a key issue, but the type of funding that I think the ecosystem needs, especially in Africa and a lot of underpenetrated areas, is funding from real free market, high return investors. I know that sounds crazy because a lot of people argue that no, we need patient capital, but there's beauty in going after investors that say, I want returns, I want you to be big. And it doesn't mean that these investors should force these entrepreneurs to scale in a haphazard, unprofitable, very damaging way. I think you can mix the two of saying, hey, we want you to solve real problems and make a real impact, but we want you to be sustainable. We want you to grow fast. We want you to expand globally. Those are the investors that I think we really need to see more in Africa. And Stripe acquiring Paystack was really good for the ecosystem. More corporate investors, more global investors that bring Africa into the ecosystem. And I would say that with any other ecosystem that's trying to be developed. Connections, bridging to the global world, like what Susan is doing. It's so important, because that is how these markets become sustainable, and that's how these companies really grow. And another thing is local entrepreneurship. There are very few entrepreneurs that have seen big exits in Africa, but the little entrepreneurs that have seen some exits are now investing in angel funds, creating angel funds, and helping entrepreneurs scale and become big. And that's that mixture of, that international sort of go get it, so sort of capital with the local entrepreneurs' capital, I think can make really powerful ecosystem.
And that's what I love about the entrepreneurial mindset. Those that are successful have a tendency to want to give back and make others successful, which is the true definition of a mentor, not necessarily looking for that next best opportunity, although there's a time and a place for it, but the give back and helping grow and being able to mentor those to get to the next level. George, let's try the technology, and hopefully we're connecting loud and clear on this one as well. So what is the number one way that ecosystem builders, such as an innovation center or other types of resources, can make a substantial difference in your market?
Yeah, I think just it's probably the different stakeholders together. Events like this, having a physical place to congregate, that's key. I think the sort of procuring financial incentives, grants, breaks for investors, lease agreements to kind of allow people to congregate. I think a lot of successful ecosystems have had real vertical depth and concentration in a particular field. So you have concentration of scientists, investors, entrepreneurs, talent, investors all around a given sector, and I think that can be really key. But I also think it does just take time. Kind of as Barbara was saying, I think alumni of successful startups are often key to a successful ecosystem. Whether it be, the PayPal mafia example in the US, it went on and started so many different companies. In the UK, you have sort of lastminute.com, and 4 people from our business are from there, and they've all been entrepreneurs themselves and facilitated angel investments or started companies themselves as well. So building that infrastructure of angel investors, mentors, and experienced operators who then go and start companies, I think that is actually really, really key too. And innovation centers just need to facilitate that level of ambition and congregation and flow of different ideas and capital.
So what I'm hoping as innovation center models evolve over the world, that they become known more as collision stations, where you're forcing different networks to collide with one another and complement each other and force them around. I was going to say the water cooler, but it's really a caffeine culture. So get them around the coffee machine, and great ideas begin to happen as a result of that. And as you talk about venture capital and just funding, and Barbara mentioned something too, what we find, especially here in the US market, is that love money is relatively easy to find. You can go to the aunt or the uncle, or you might find that angel investment money, and then there's the venture capital and there's the institutional financing, but there are often gaps between what I can get versus what I need, and how do we close that gap moving forward. And I think that innovation center models, with the networks that they create and the wraparound services and programs and events, et cetera, should hopefully strengthen the ability to make that happen more easily. And so accessibility is really the key word, I guess, at the end of the day for these resources. Danny, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, building on what's been said, I think for me, this the sorts of things that I feel like a good ecosystem builder should provide is challenge, learning, and connectivity, to name 3 important ones. And we were talking earlier about making sure that what entrepreneurs are receiving is actually value add. I've seen a number of times ecosystem centers or builders who are genuinely trying to do the right thing by providing, come and have a pizza, let's have a coffee, all those sorts of things. And there's, as I say, the sort of the intentions are all very good. Yep. But actually what ends up happening is that you just, have a chat here and there. And there might be something good that happens that evening or that lunchtime or, whatever it is, but it's not targeted. So actually the opportunity cost or, and what you're losing out can be pretty great. But if you learn a lot, and you drill down into individual verticals, you drill down into the different needs between us, what a CTO has on his or her mind versus the CEO versus the CCO versus, frankly, anybody in a startup as it's building its exec team, then you're able to learn those specific, issues that are being raised, share that, and all of a sudden you're starting to create value around being able to, deal with pain points, bring people together, whatever it might be. And that's why I talk about challenge, because, by learning that, you're actually challenging people back on what they think is important and what isn't. Learning, obviously, as part of that, and connectivity, because that of course is key. That will lead to being able to have mentoring relationships or opening business development doors or whatever it might be. But, you know, one of the things I'd sort of end by saying is that I feel that sometimes ecosystem centers and builders make a mistake that they can categorize startups into sort of three buckets, or, you know, entrepreneurial companies into three buckets. So they'll go, oh, you're quite young, so you're a startup. You've been around for a few years, so you're a scale up. And you've been around for 7 years and you're nearly there. So we'll call you something big and exciting and we'll put you into that bucket. And the reality is that those three buckets are so different that if you are actually going to provide off-the-shelf solutions for each of those buckets, then you're not really going to be able to address the issues they have. But when you have an ecosystem center stroke builder that actually understands that well, is able to tailor, is able to make that distinction and really drills down, then I think that's where I've seen examples of real success.
And I think you've hit the solution there, is that when you say off the shelf versus customizing, and what we're learning in our market is when we customize programs, whether it's an ideate or an incubator, an accelerator, and then eventually a post-accelerate program, you can't take it off of the shelf. And we have targeted industries, which are the future of South Florida or even the state of Florida. How do we customize those programs for entrepreneurs that are specific to that industry so that it's not a generic approach in terms of handle, and also making sure you got the right people with the right plans, with the right money. And I think that's the separating differential between a lot of these types of models around the world. So I thank you for that. Susan, what's your perspective?
I kind of want to touch on things both Barbara and Danny said, because what Barbara was getting to with investors who actually cared about growth is just professionalism. And so much of the value an angel investor provides, it's not the money, it's their experience, network, and what they're bringing to the table to guide that entrepreneur, right? It's really the sweat equity on top of the cash that makes a difference with many of the angel investors. We actually just finished the first of a few angel investor trainings we're doing for for the Kingdom of Saudi, for the national government. And we're talking about people spending millions of dollars a year out of their own pockets doing angel investing, but the professionalism wasn't there. So when you tie that back into Danny's comment, I think that really is where the foundation comes from. It's having that transparency and accountability, whether it's understanding which mentor adds the most value in which situation, or what kind of programs and value-added services. But every single person in an ecosystem, especially a program, needs to have a reason to be there because of what value they can add. And so circling back, David had mentioned virtual communities, and we built a virtual community 7 years ago, and our software is that community both for specific regions or countries, but then also for industry verticals, depending on who our clientele is. One of the challenges we kept seeing early on is people would start a community and kind of just have a bunch of people there who would be mentors or label themselves investors, or call themselves entrepreneurs, but not have the proper evaluation of where they should be able to access, or what type of match would be the most fortuitous, not just for the entrepreneur, but for the mentor too. Because sometimes mentors will not get a lot out of working with a certain type of entrepreneur, but totally come out of it refreshed after working with someone who might be a little further ahead or need very specific support that is more complementary to their interests for the future, not just what they've done in the past. So I think that when I look at what most innovation centers do, we have several Gen Campus locations. We have one in Johannesburg. We have 4 more opening this year, and the major one opening in Cairo. And the model we're using is very much focused on professionalism and standards of documentation, accountability, and transparency. So as you're building out the center, there's clarity as to people's roles and accountability back to the center for having whatever access they have. And that really changes the way you're able to see who's doing what and the overall value that the center is offering to the ecosystem for economic development reasons, or for, in general, being awesome and building great companies that scale and grow type reasons. So it really is about incentivizing professionalism and accountability and having transparency throughout the whole process.
That's great. And I also like the fact that you brought up that it's not a one-way street. It's a connection between everybody that's involved, and there's a win-win for everybody. And often you find these types of models is anybody that wants to volunteer and be involved, they're accepted. And there's also a time and a place for that, but you have to match the connections so that there's a win and there's result at the end of the day. And I love what you were doing with Jen and the establishment of these different centers around the world. This is only going to break down the barriers, as David would say. So with that, David, you have an opportunity to close this specific question. So make it great.
We'll see. So we do have visibility into a lot of these ecosystems you're talking about. One of our biggest communities is in the Denver Boulder area. So what we found in about 50 different communities we operate in the US, that there are three qualities that, as you're looking to build out the Broward County, Southwest Florida or Southeast Florida kind of ecosystem, the first one is the mindset. There are communities that have a fixed pie mindset and communities that think that the 2 + 2 = 5, because some communities think, some support organizations win and others lose because there's fixed funding or fixed resources. A true ecosystem understands that collectively you have the best opportunity to attract investments, attract talent, etc., because people see from the outside and instantly, I'm not kidding, I can walk into a community and instantly can tell the communities that are highly siloed just by the way they talk about the community, right? And so that comes with the idea that you have the growth mindset. Do you feel that collectively we all increase the size of the pie, or do we feel like it's a zero-sum game, some win, some lose?
Yep.
The second one is culture, and people talk about culture in very loose terms, but you can actually formally create a culture where you celebrate failure, where you reduce the kind of shame that goes with entrepreneurs that have not succeeded, because we all celebrate success. We all have top 10 lists. And on a daily basis, I see on the internet, top 10 hardest startups. The ones who successfully started are the ones who have failed several times, right? And so how do you create that culture of innovation and fail fast and celebrate together kind of mentality? And then the third one is using data. Susan had talked about this, using data to really understand infrastructure gaps. Is it access to capital, which, by the way, we focus on that, but there are a lot more to it. For example, when you combine technical assistance or expert mentorship with capital, your capital works twice as hard for you. Right? So being able to use data analytics to understand what infrastructure gaps I have in my community, and then using investment dollars to stand those assets up, because then again, your startups and your small businesses then have the best chance to succeed. We found these three to be like the core components of a successful or an emerging ecosystem.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about communities and silos. There's a really interesting movement taking place in South Florida right now. There's a lot of publicity on a daily basis with a focus on Miami. Miami's doing this and Miami's doing that. And the reality of it, it's South Florida. It's the Tri-County area from Palm Beach to Fort Lauderdale to Miami. But the world views all of South Florida as Miami. And there's this developing ecosystem. So I think that as partners and stakeholders in this ecosystem, we need to do a better job of collaborating together and winning together. And it's a region, not necessarily a city. And I know that there are other parts of the country and other parts of the world that deal with it as well. But you're right, there are siloed systems and there are those that are more collaborative, and it's the networking and the connections that make so much sense. So George, we're going to go over to you. And by the way, George is my middle name. Founders Factory has invested in over 90 startups and the creation of more than 30. Can you share what the key to these successful investments has been and the survival of these startups?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, actually, I just really loved what David said about kind of destigmatizing the failure of startups. And I think a healthy ecosystem encourages startups to try riskier and riskier ambitious projects. And they know that if they fail, that the ecosystem will support them or hire them into startups.
Yep.
So really support that exist. yeah, we that number last year. We're in the now. We try to insight into where they have problems. That for us is one key aspect. We love mentorship, but it doesn't always go as far as you might want it to. So in our model, we unusually have actually hired over 100 operators across product design, growth, data science, engineering to give really hands-on support to the startups in the early stages when they maybe can't afford some of those specialist skill sets. So that's been important for us too. I think from an ecosystem perspective, actually, there's been really favorable things that the British government have done. There are many bad things that they've done too, but during the pandemic and after Brexit, they set up the British Business Bank, which has stepped in where some EU funding had been lost. They've done very favorable tax breaks and angel investment schemes. So angel investors can get 50% off their income tax bill in exchange for making an investment in a startup. And that's really helped a lot of businesses that we've seen. And during the middle of the pandemic, they created the Future Fund, which has come in to co-invest alongside VCs and support startups that might have been struggling because of the pandemic. And that's plugged a very real gap in the ecosystem and has helped a lot of our portfolio companies as well. So yeah, I guess our perspective is this combination of using the incumbent corporations as a facilitator for startups to show them where there are opportunities, but also to help them get to market, to try and facilitate operators to give support, and to lobby and lean on governments to provide the right incentives, support structures for those startups to thrive as well.
Yeah, so facilitation seems to be a recurring theme in this particular discussion, and is outside of this panel as well. So facilitation, networking, connectivity, accessibility are all key words. And it's interesting you talk about the British government, and obviously a lot going on in the UK right now with Brexit, et cetera. I was recently, the last few weeks, connected to the Welsh government, where incidentally I was fortunate to spend 3 years of my life during my graduate studies, and what Wales is doing as a region to attract entrepreneurs to come to the region. And it's this transition from coal mining to a digital economy, to electronics, to technology, and all of the things that are transforming and reinventing what they do as a region. And then how do you invest the rest of the world into what you're doing through the facilitation and the connection, and some really great things and great examples going on. And I can see a lot of positive things about what's going on in the United Kingdom. I'm always fascinated with people's career paths, and everyone has their own story. Mine really started at the age of 15 with my first day on my birthday working at McDonald's, and that's when I realized that I didn't take authority very well, and it changed my life, and wanted to do something really cool with it. But I'd like to know what made you and your organization choose to support and or tackle this industry of being an ecosystem builder, or having some piece within this ecosystem building environment. And Susan, I'd like to start with you.
Well, I was lucky enough to be an entrepreneur very young, and my dad was an entrepreneur in addition to being a college professor. So I never saw problem solving as a problem. I always enjoyed it and felt like it was a game. But the reality of why I now support entrepreneurship programs and build software for entrepreneurship programs is very much tied to the fact that as I was building and growing my own first business before I sold it when I was 21, I didn't really understand what I would be or should be looking for from different types of people. And this is a very long time ago, despite how young I look. So the big challenge continuously was, I was very tenacious and would just contact anyone I wanted to for any reason to get whatever support I needed or figure something out. And I had a lot of people who called themselves mentors, but didn't really understand what mentoring was. So I went back to college and did my undergrad, my MBA, and my PhD, and I ended up doing my research on the role of mentoring to create a culture of innovation. So I spent many years trying to unpack what makes for a good mentoring relationship. And it's funny because I love building entrepreneurial businesses and love supporting entrepreneurs. And I just think back to what I would have wanted at different points of my own life on this very non-linear journey. And at its core, you want to have people around you who are taking this as seriously as you are. And so I think all of the implementation of, we have thousands of hours of content, and we have all of these modules for different types of entrepreneurs at different times, but it's only as good as the entrepreneur is honest with him or herself. And so that's been a really fun part of my evolution, is in realizing how rose-colored the glasses need to be for most of us to keep going. So it really comes back to helping people not go through all the pain that I continue to go through on a daily basis, and wanting to solve problems for my customer, which is entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders.
So it's interesting too, the failures come up as a word in our discussions, and you alluded to it just now as well, and being able to make mistakes. And sometimes we live in this culture where failure is not an option. You're not allowed to make mistakes, and you're rewarded for everything that you do. And it's a lot different today than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. But this is an interesting discussion. I'd like to take it over to Danny for your perspective on this.
Yeah, so the non-linear aspect is something I can really relate to. So my own sort of 10-second background story is that I was a banker for 10 years, international, sort of traveling around the world quite a lot, and then I joined the UK government for another 10 years. I should stop saying how many years I was in each place, because you're going to figure out exactly how old I am. And during that time with the UK government, I was based in London, and I was responsible for the marketing strategy of how the UK positions its economy internationally. I was also a diplomat for 5 years, based in New York. So that was another, tremendous sort of a front row seat into what's going on in the sort of geopolitics of today. And then I decided I want to come back to the private sector, but I didn't want to come back to a large organization. I'd spent a lot of my time in government helping entrepreneurs and helping startups, and I decided I wanted to be part of that, and I've been in that space the last 4 years, and definitely haven't regretted the decision. I absolutely love it. The rationale behind the company that I'm leading now, which is not a company that I founded, but I was brought in as CEO, probably in a way because of the diversity of experience and leadership experience that I'd had, is something that really related to me, which was protecting organizations, large and small, public sector, private sector. Some of our clients are in the intelligence community and defense. Other clients are, really small businesses, but we add exactly the same value. It doesn't really matter, how big or small they are or the space they operate in. They are potentially going to be attacked. Hopefully not, but at some stage they probably will. And if that's the case, then we provide technology that can help them enormously with that. And the thing that really attracted me was a different way of doing things. It goes back to the original question behind our discussion. We're a software company that deals with file-based threats, an industry that typically relies on antivirus technologies, some of which are very, very good. But the world has evolved, and antivirus and sandboxing isn't enough anymore. You need new things. You need to be able to have new solutions. We provide, one of them. And everything that drives people in our company with 50 people, you talk to every single individual, and they are driven by this capacity that we have to protect and to safeguard. And that's really powerful. And, we talk a lot, I think, in different ways about purpose. That's our purpose. That's something that we find very motivating, and that's why we are doing what we're doing.
So something tells me there's a next step. I don't know what it is, but we'll be interested to follow your path. Thank you for that.
Well, I always wanted to be a pop star, so maybe.
With today's technology, that's easily done. All right, David, I know you got an interesting journey as well. What would you like to tell our audience today?
Yeah, so in 2008, I graduated and I wanted to go change the world. So I quit a Fortune 500 job, went back to India, and started a free trade handbag business, and came back to the US, and I'm not kidding, walked up and down St. Pete Beach here in Tampa, Florida, selling these handbags. Absolutely shameless. I'm very proud of it. And we were almost able to scale it to profitability. But after 4 years of trying to make it work, my CPA told me, at some point, they're going to call this a hobby. And you're going to have to shut it down. So with a lot of tears and, a lot of pain, I shut it down and realized I wasn't changing the world with that idea. went back to work for corporate America, led innovation globally for Nielsen, traveled to Shanghai, Tel Aviv, Dubai, really looking at the next generation of AI tools for retail and for television measurement. And in the course of it, I realized that I still wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I still wanted to go back and fix why I failed the first time. Because I felt that entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is very, very simple. And a lot of people actually who are entrepreneurs don't realize they're entrepreneurs, right? Because entrepreneurs is one of the earliest ways in which we actually made a living in the cave ages, right? It's literally about wealth creation for your family, the ability to support your family and to live your dreams. Like, that's what entrepreneurship is. Everything else is just like noise, right? If you're not creating wealth for yourself and for your family, you're missing out on the fundamental reason why you're in that game. And so I went back to say, I'm going to fix that problem. The problem I realized was that small businesses and startups have blinders on, right? Because you're like everything to yourself. You're the one who does the shipping. You're the one who does all the sales. You're the one who's managing the operations. And it's really hard to figure out what's out there in the ecosystem for you. And when I closed that business, I found that instantly, I realized there was Tampa Bay Wave, which is a great organization locally, and there's a local SBDC. I didn't even know what an SBDC was. And I figured out all these different resources in the community, thinking, excuse me, if I'm the ultimate hustler and I don't know what exists in my community for me, how many other people that are far more disadvantaged than I am, a single mother or a single father trying to put their kid to bed, somebody who's physically handicapped and cannot leave their home, people that actually can't make it to meetups, etc. How are they going to find these resources? And so I made it my mission to go and simplify connectivity for small businesses in the communities in which we operate, joining forces with the people that already have this mission, like the Entrepreneurship Center at NSU and the work you're doing, John, and the vision that you've laid out to create an entrepreneurship ecosystem in South Florida. So that's the mission I'm on, and that's what I'm passionate about.
Well, thanks. So I learned something new. I did not know about the handbag business, but impressive. All right. Barbara, how about you?
Yeah, sure. So I think my background is really premised on my passion for financial services and technology. So financial services really started because my father set up a bank in Nigeria when I was young. So I watched him sort of build the bank and become very prominent in the economy, because as a bank, you really are the center of the economy. All the key top business leaders, all the top companies. And I just saw a lot of people come in and out of our house and how he was building his company. And I said, financial services is really important for growing an economy. So even though I studied engineering because I was passionate in technology, I worked in banking. Like Danny, I was an investment banker. And then when I got a chance, Bob Diamond, he used to be the CEO of Barclays, he set up a platform called Atlas Mar. It was a financial services investment platform. I thought that was a great opportunity for me to build a platform where I could invest in banks and go back to Africa from when I was in New York and work with all the key bankers that I knew and shareholders of banks. And that experience was what really led me to fintech, because I saw that banking was being disrupted by technology. And while I was passionate about financial services, I wanted to do it in an innovative way and really make a difference to the masses. When my father was building a bank, there wasn't cloud computing and mobile devices, that we were using satellites then. So my generation is now focused on not building banks, traditional banks, but building, fintech platforms across the economy. And I also was the chief growth officer for a digital identity company, an AI company in New York. And I did that because I wanted to bring that AI company into Africa. Digital identity is a very important part of fintech. And it's actually a global issue right now, especially with the vaccinations going on, by the way. That's a separate conversation. But yeah, and I brought that platform to Africa, and we scaled it with banks in Africa. And I, as an operator and an entrepreneur, I sort of saw the challenges of scaling companies in Africa. And I wanted to set up a fintech fund really to do something different. Being a fund manager is an entrepreneur in itself, right? Like we have to come up with a unique value proposition for the ecosystem. And I mentioned one of it was in how I invest in companies, in companies that are really sort of driving the ecosystem, but also in terms of partnering with corporates is very important. As I've worked with a lot of banks and telcos and all these fintech sort of wannabes, I noticed that a lot of them want access to startups. And so one of the key things my fund is going to be doing is working with these partners and helping them create value for our startups and sourcing companies from these platforms, and also helping with them with delivering exits and further investments into these startups. So being an entrepreneur as a fund manager, we have to think differently in how we're helping the ecosystem. And I think my passion for financial services, technology, and being an entrepreneur started from when I was young, and I'm sort of applying it throughout my career and with this fund. So that's my background.
So I appreciate that. And there's so much happening in the world of fintech. So not only are you an entrepreneur, but you're probably defined as a pioneer in the fintech field, because it's really at the early stages. There's so much more that's going to happen, and annually when you look at what's happening just in the banking sector alone, I know that I have gone from in-person banking to 100% virtual banking and don't interact with anybody anymore, and transactions occur like lightning speed, and it's great. Still room for improvement, but there's so much happening, and thanks for sharing that. So George, we'll end this particular question with you and your journey.
Yeah, so I also started in finance, and also had a bit of a problem with authority. So made a good escape from that. It was a terrible banker actually. And yeah, I initially started a kind of matchmaking company in the events industry, and that became a kind of prototype for what we do. And yeah, I mean, I love my sort of job so much, in that we spend a lot of time thinking about big problems that we can solve through technology and entrepreneurship. And I think there's nothing better than spending your days speaking to entrepreneurs, basically, who have really, really deep domain expertise, have real passion for solving different challenges, and have amazing technical skills. And I think it's probably the best way to learn is speaking to these people on a daily basis who have really, really like mastered their field. So yeah, that's sort of been my journey, and I guess my kind of perspective today is just getting to listen to these people and figure out how we can help them best. And I just love that kind of entrepreneurship mentality that anything is possible and everything is solvable. Yeah, it's certainly a more enjoyable way to spend my time than in the finance industry at the start of my career.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So there's something that's common among all five of you as panelists, and I think the one thing that is coming out in this particular discussion, and I know it does in individual discussions with you, it's passion, and you're very passionate about changing the world, and not only passionate about changing it, you're investing your part to actually do something about it, and there's results that come. And if you think about other passionate people and entrepreneurs in the world doing the same thing, how the world is changing despite all the bad and negativity. There's so much greatness happening, and you're all contributors to that. We have about 10 minutes left in this panel, and the next question that I'm going to ask you, if we could keep the answers relatively short, because I do want to get to another topic before we close, is really focused on the global startup ecosystem and how it's connected by different regions from all over the world, and each region has its own set of trends and challenges and opportunities and strategies. What are you seeing in your own respective markets that is working effectively for your startup community? I know it's a very great question, so you can interpret that in the way that best suits your perspective. But David, if I could start with you.
Yeah, so looking at connectivity globally, I think even this pandemic has kind of broken down even further barriers around collaboration. We see some of our university partners even have mentors in Europe that are mentoring the startups, or even looking at commercialization. IP that starts in some of these universities and their research departments now have global scale. I think that the global marketplace has kind of fundamentally shifted the way we look at who the end consumer is. And I think that the future of this more connected ecosystem is that there'll be a free exchange of ideas. The thing that excites me the most are markets like Africa and Asia, where you can literally skip multiple iterations of a product lifecycle and just go to where the solution is. If you think about even fintech in Asia now, you can do a lot of your banking just through text messaging, same with Africa, right? I think that this innovation trend will continue to accelerate to the point where you can have even emerging markets play a much more significant role in driving the path forward, either as consumers or as innovators. I couldn't be more thrilled about just where we're headed. Like you said, John, I think as innovators and collaborators, I think there's endless world of possibilities out there.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, I think what's working right now is that there's a lot of interest coming in from the global community into the Africa VC ecosystem. And I think that connectivity is really important because these companies really need to grow and scale, and they need that connectivity with the rest of the world. Fintech, I believe, is a global language, right? Across the entire digital economy. Obviously, local regulations have different standards that everybody has to comply. But I think fundamentally the global fintech phenomenon is the same idea across all regions. Everybody is looking for ways to democratize access to financial services. And I think a lot of VC firms globally that have raised millions and millions of dollars should be going into Africa and investing in these companies. Beyond Silicon Valley, there are a lot of opportunities in these ecosystems, and we need to encourage more investors. It's not just about, we talk about diversity and inclusion, adding more people of color, females. A lot of these, people of color and females and minorities, they're all outside, they're also outside America, and they're global. And in fact, you would find more of that diversity globally. And so it's important for that bridge to happen, because I think it's a win-win situation for the VC community in the US to start putting their dollars in innovative ideas and not just the same homogeneous ideas that happen all the time. And it's also a win for these ecosystems because they're getting connected to the rest of the world. So I think that's what's working. Jeff Bezos' family and Ribbit Capital invested in a company called Shipper Cash, which is an African founders. And so there's a lot more of this. And I hope to hear from some VC firms going forward, because I really do think this is the next 5 years. We're going to see a lot of unicorns come out of some of these ecosystems outside of the US.
Yeah, great. And thank you, Danny.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think, some of the best examples I've seen are when you've got really good connectivity between government, academia, and the startup space, and within that, obviously, ecosystem builders, etc. And I say that because picking up on a point that George made earlier on, and as an example of the UK, and I completely agree, some good things and some bad things. But let's focus on the good things. If you have the right level of policy that encourages investors, seasoned investors, to make it attractive for them to invest in startups. If you have a policy that allows people from various, from around the world to be able to have the right entrepreneurship visas to be able to come into the country, a very long list of et ceteras that kind of, sets the mood music for, the startup world. That's really powerful. And the mandate is coming from the very top, as in, government is behind this. If you have then, linked to academia, you're not relying on, trying to scramble around to find, one great university, but actually one great university might connect you to, areas of research and other, all of a sudden you've got a very strong network there. And I think from a global perspective, when you have those two and access to those two and the support from those two, then you have real global reach, because the right level of, networks, connectivity, bridges, whatever you want to call them, already exist. UK, US has a whole host of great programs that the startup community can benefit from, associations between universities, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, that access, that support, that sort of two-way relationship, if you have that coming together, then the ecosystem builders can really deliver something that's very punchy and, very, very value added.
I appreciate that. Susan.
I think the goal with internationalization and the opportunity where now everybody feels accessible is really attractive. because as entrepreneurs, we all want bigger and better and to solve as many problems as possible.
Yeah.
I think there's a massive disconnect for many people about what last mile actually looks like, what doing things on the ground. So theoretically, everyone in the world may be your potential customer, but when you get down to compliance and regulatory and just how people work differently and communicate differently and level of understanding of attention to detail, it varies. Managing people across different time zones, and when there's a storm and electricity, all of these things, it's a little too much fun sometimes. So we've been doing a few programs for high growth companies. So companies already at 5 to 15 million in revenue for international globalization. So they might be already regional, maybe they're throughout North America and they're looking at going to Europe, or a lot of times it's Middle East or Asia coming from North America or Europe. And there's just a very big disconnect, not in how great your product is, but the vendorization process or all of those other things that mean that there would be either a B2B adoption or how things actually work in B2C adoptions in other markets, and the amount of time it takes to gain trust and language, etc. So I think that internationalization is definitely the goal for everyone, and giving people that mindset early about what the strategy would be and how, but really making sure that there's enough of an understanding of what's happening on the ground and making the right decision for your business so that you can remain profitable and grow, instead of just thinking you have this white whale of a region you want to tackle and it ends up killing you because it's just too outside of where your comfort zone is at this point, or finding the right people to help you do it. So
I appreciate that. And George, we'll have you conclude. This will be the final part of the questioning. And then after you're done, we're going to go into a lightning round, and then we'll come to the conclusion of the event, and I'll wrap up with some words. But it's all yours.
Well, I think everyone's made a lot of good points on this topic through the duration of the session. But I think maybe we could talk more about kind of talent and how you can create incentives for people to migrate to a particular ecosystem. There's controversies over HB1 visas in the US right now, and Brexit, and that's been difficult for the UK. I think there are really interesting ideas out of Estonia around digital citizenship and virtual citizenship, which others can take heed from, and particularly in a world of remote work. I think that could be an exciting trend for the future that different ecosystems and governments can encourage, because I think talent is an absolutely key component. I'd say one other interesting trend is sort of scientists and academia sort of for their lifetime, as they might have done historically, but actually becoming founders and being encouraged to build startups. I think ecosystems can help those scientists combine with product and commercial talent, and find different routes to funding other than just through the university itself. And I think that's going to release a whole new wave of scientific entrepreneurship, where, outside of the more kind of traditional kind of sectors like e-commerce and finance, but into kind of biotech, fuel cells, sustainability, and others. So I think that's something that universities and governments can really do, and to foster even stronger ecosystems, and it seems like a powerful trend to me.
So I appreciate that, and I have a whole set of questions that, depending on how our time went today, regards to local and national government influence in the world of the startup ecosystem, which is probably another panel in its own right. But what I want to do as we get towards the end here, I want to enter a lightning round, and I was able to give you a little bit of guidance up front before we got online today. But what we're going to do is I want you to come up with one word that comes to your mind when you think about the future of entrepreneurship. And David, we're going to start with you. So you're on camera.
I think it's opportunity. I think entrepreneurship represents opportunity for millions of people that are trying to break poverty and provide wealth.
Okay, great. Opportunity. Susan?
Data-driven. There's a hyphen, so that counts.
Okay, it does. Danny?
The word I choose is limitless. But I'm just gonna cheat and add a second, which obviously plays to the company I represent, safe.
Okay, terrific. Barbara?
I would say open systems. I think the next wave of entrepreneurship is around building open infrastructure, building ecosystems around that, and sort of scaling across different ecosystems. I think companies that are doing that are going to be really powerful in the economy.
Great. And George?
I mean, similar to Danny, I don't think it's going away, so I was going to say infinite. I hope that's not too cheesy, but I live in America now, so I'll go for it.
All right, so opportunity, data-driven, limitless/safe, open systems, and infinite. So those are all great words. So this has just been a really terrific discussion on the state of the global startup ecosystem, and we've discussed trends and challenges, opportunities and strategies, and it seems that we've really only touched the tip of the iceberg, and there is so much more to discuss, and we'll continue to do so with future panels, and we invite all of you back to be involved as we evolve with our model. And despite the current state of the world, the future looks positive and opportunistic for the global startup ecosystem, and we thank you all for being key influencers in changing the world. So I cannot thank you enough. It's been a true pleasure to moderate today's panel with you. And if you please stay in touch with us regarding your insights and your guidance and your words of wisdom. It's greatly appreciated. And for the benefit of the audience, I'd like to send a very special thank you for participating in today's inaugural event. And special thanks to David Ponraj from Startup Space, Susan Amat from the Global Entrepreneurship Network, Danny Lopez from Glasswall, George Northcott from Founders Factory, and Barbara Iyayi from Unicorn Growth Capital. Also, a very special thank you to all of the people behind the scenes that made this happen. There was a lot of work and sweat and equity that went into this, so thank you. And if you'd like to follow more about the Alan B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation, we're going to be hosting a series of virtual events, most likely on a weekly basis as we scale up towards our summer opening. You can find us on our website at nova.edu/innovation or email innovation@nova.edu. And we also have a telephone number that people don't tend to use that much anymore, but it's 954-262-TECH. That's TECH. And we're also live on social media now with Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So thank you for joining us today. Happy New Year to everybody. And this will conclude today's program.